Sorry, it was a little confusing in how I related on to Mr. Cooper, so, it's easier just to say we have $450,000 contingency with our current budget.
I want to be a little bit
I would too, and, and as we go along, at this point, as some of the subcontractors have been involved in providing, pricing and input on the pricing, but when things go out for competitive bid, then that's when we hope to see the savings then, because then they're competing for the project, and that's really where you get the best cost. And that's another stage down the line before we get to that.
I understand.
Got it.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, ma'am.
if you had $275 per square foot figured, and you come in at $279, that's pretty good. That's pretty good right there.
Yeah, we were extremely pleased, especially like you said at this stage of the game.
Mhm. That's pretty good.
I had a question, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
I think in the plans, there's a cost figure for the purchase of a generator, is there not?
Yes, sir.
And I know
Correct.
that the county has a generator. Is it possible that that generator could be used?
I just talked to Alan about that this morning, Rick, and from what Alan knows off the top of his head, it's a 250 kW generator. The current specs, I checked with him right before I walked up here, and the current specs call for a 500 kilowatt generator. So I don't know what the engineers might do if they, instead of buying a 500, they get a 250 and piggyback the two. I don't know if that's more efficient or less efficient.
You get the 40 kW size of 20 kW. That's, excuse me, that's a 20 kW. They're saying you need a 40 kW to run your facility.
I guess my question, is it worthwhile looking into that?
Well, I'm gonna, Nick and I talked about that this morning, and I'm gonna go get the specs off of this one, and then give it to our engineers and let the engineers say it's worthwhile to move it and install it, or not.
Yeah, it's worthwhile looking, because initially I thought it was a 25 kW. It's 250 kW, so I don't really know what it is. I don't think it's 500 kW, but it's big enough to be on the back of a semi. I mean, it's a big one.
Okay.
Yeah, it's definitely worth looking into, and we'll see what the engineers, they'll run all the calculations and see where we are, but it's definitely worth looking to see if it's a possibility.
Follow-up question, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
The CM is at risk. At what point does that at-risk kick in? So we have say it's $10 million just for the purpose of a round figure. At that point, they would say, and we would say, here's the price, anything over is going to be your responsibility.
Once we actually go to the GMP price, or GMP contract. So at this point, the only contract we have with them is for pre-construction. So we have not gone to the actual GMP contract for them to actually do the construction part of it. Once we decide, we feel comfortable that Culpeper's doing what we expect them to do, we feel like they're in line with our thinking as far as the budget, and we feel comfortable with their company as a whole. Once we, and at any point during this process of doing budgets, we can choose to go to a GMP with them. This would be a little early to go to a GMP, just because I would rather have more detailed design to do another round of budget pricing. But after the next round, if we choose to go to a GMP with them at that time, that's when we would lock in the actual cost, and from there going forward, as long as the scope remained the same, then they are responsible for delivering that scope at that price that they guaranteed.
Follow-up question. Would that be after the subs submit their bids?
Yes, sir, that would be typically what we would, yes. But before, I would think that if they would agree to a GMP price or a GMP contract, they're gonna wanna go out for competitive bids.
Good, okay, thank you.
I don't have anything else for you, unless you have a follow-up question for me. I'll let Mr. Graham give you his report.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, ma'am.
Let me ask Mr. Cooper something. Mr. Cooper, if you don't mind, stay right there for just a second. Let me ask you something. We've got talks of Mr. Mark O'Brien being here, come to us to present something to the board and all in the future weeks. Makes my mind wander. What is your, what do you, let me put it another way. What do you see your one-year strategic plan being, or do you have one? And what do you see your 5-year strategic plan being, or do you have one?
We did within the first 2 months of my arrival, which is coming up on 2 years, we did a 3-year strategic plan, which consisted of programs, financial, personnel, human resources, and programs, et cetera. Now, some of that we've not been able to complete. Obviously, a big part of it was to get this building program back on track. Part of it was to put a clinic on the island, which we brought to you, and it was declined. We wanted to enhance some financial programs, which we have had some luck with. We're not completely done with. The geriatric psych and the RHC process being two of those. There was a lot of time spent on employees and the benefit programs for employees. One of the problems that we have is that we are unable to create what they call qualified benefit programs because they are not our employees. They are leased employees. So in order for you to have a qualified retirement plan, really any benefit plan, if it's going to be ERISA qualified, you can only offer that to people that are your employees. And the problem that we have is that the company is a for-profit and the county, i.e. the hospital, is a nonprofit. So that creates another rift that the leasing company has been kind of squirrely about wanting to allow our employees into 401ks and things like that. So yes, we have a strategic plan. We've worked the strategic plan to the point where it's time for us to go back and redo it again. I mean, you generally do a 3 to 5 year plan and then redo it after 2 years.
So of those goals and objectives that you got, how many of them have been met?
I would say we've probably met about 50% of it, 60% of it, and some of them are ongoing. One of the big things that we had in the strategic plan was to upgrade the appearance of our current facility, understanding that, you can have a vision of what the future might look like, but you have to take care of business right now. And so we probably have 3 pages of little projects that we have done to upgrade the current facility aesthetically and operationally. So I'd say we've accomplished about 50 to 60% of it.
I just want to make sure we know where we're going to in the future. So
Yes, ma'am.
That's all it is. Thank you, Mr. Cooper.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. John.
Last time we were up here, I think we were preempted by time, and at that point in time, I understand that you have some questions from the time before, which I was not able to be here. So if you'd like, I'll let you go ahead and ask your questions. If they've been answered, that's fine. I can go ahead and do the financials, but I'm open to your questions right now.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, ma'am.
I don't have any questions right now. I would like for him to present the financial.
Okay.
We had a break-even month, basically, in the month of March, a nondescript type of month. Overall, it was a $5,000 profit. Through the, we're $19,000 in the red through the 6 months here, so that's halfway through the year. Balance sheet is still stable. The income statement, as you can see, it's been broken out like usual between the various entities. All of the entities except the clinics showing a profit for the month, and we understand what's been going on with the clinics with physician turnover, and that's, knock on wood, going to stabilize now. So All in all, the financials were pretty basic and nondescript. We've had 3 straight months of small profits. We're still a little bit in the red through 6 months year to date. Any questions on the financials for March?
Nothing on March.
Well, I'm glad to see the cash on hand is 13 days compared to 7 days.
Right.
The only thing that concerns me, as it concerns me every time, is when I look at the net accounts receivable days, and
Okay, I could address that too.
you know what I'm fixing to ask.
Yes, ma'am,
you then.
yes, it's all about cash flow, I understand that. One of the, we did some financial projections, and they were intended to go out through September. All of those are on track still to be met, including meaningful use, and one of those projections was making up accounts receivable from the times before when we had changed billing systems a couple of times due to our contracts. Found out last night, there's almost $250,000 on the floor at Medicare, which is part of this makeup, that within 7 to 14 days will be here. So, and that by itself, by the time you take the cash and apply that, and take the contractuals that apply with that, the AR days will go down about 20 or 22. So that's just one item that will lower that number. And if I was in your chair, I would ask that same question too.
Well, it concerns me on accounts receivable. So you're saying the changing of the billing companies, the problems with the billing companies and all that is what made the accounts receivable?
That typically
up to
happens
89
every time.
days?
Yes, ma'am, that typically happens.
And from what I'm told, if you have accounts receivable anywhere from 45 to 49 days is good.
Right.
And if you'll look back here, I think you got an account receivable back 12 months ago, which was September 2015. Our accounts receivable was 46.9 days.
Right.
So this has all happened since September, basically.
Right,
Yeah.
and we've gone through 2 different conversions basically, and again, like I said about the positions being consistent, now the system we're on now is consistent, and we're working through those problems, and they're being fairly addressed.
Okay. I just like to listen and hear you, Mr. Graham, because I trust you, and I trust your knowledge of the numbers, and I just like to see you here to present something to us every now and then. It's no, I'm not trying to be adversarial toward nobody or anything. I've just got to look, as the other 4 commissioners do, we've got to look out for the people's money.
Absolutely.
And this is it. I don't know, how many of y'all, Mr. Graham, Mr. Cooper, have y'all ever worked for a hospital that was owned by the local government?
I have.
Have you worked in facilities
Not
like
owned,
that?
but managed by it, yes.
Yeah. Have you, Mr. Cooper?
I've worked for several that have been owned by the county. They're generally owned through a separate 501c3. This is
Yeah.
the first one that is the county.
It is the county. That's what I'm saying. That's why we're asking you those
Yes,
questions.
to answer your question, I've worked for 3 county hospitals that,
But it was made up different.
And this is the first one I've worked for, thanking you and the public for the support, financial support that's there.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah,
without
I
that,
mean-
we would not be having this discussion.
Well, I think we, the board, we recognize the benefit and the obligation that this board has to the people, and that's why we have invested so much in that hospital. And that's why we ask questions when we feel like we have to. And, but anyway, it was good seeing you back.
Well, good to
Mr.
be here.
Brown.
I try to anticipate your questions sometimes, and sometimes you do, sometimes you don't, but that's,
Thank you.
all right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Grab a 5-minute recess.
Stay too long.
No, you're fine. Board of County Commissioners now back in session. Mr. Jason Pruitt, the airport update.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Good morning.
I want to kind of give us a quick update on what's going on at the airport. Number one, our airfield pavement project is complete, and we had a substantial completion inspection on April 26th. And we're now coordinating with Final Punch List with Polaronis Construction and preparing the final pay application for our review. The second thing was the airfield lighting. You know, that's going to be happening here pretty soon. We've actually got an advertisement, a local newspaper going out tomorrow morning. A pre-bid meeting is scheduled for May 31st, and construction is anticipated to start in early August. The commercial access road and infrastructure. Yeah.
The board will be opening bids on that project then in July.
The board will open bids on June 21st. Sorry about that. Yeah, June 21st. Bids are due on June 17th, and with construction anticipated to start in August. The commercial access road and infrastructure development drainage improvements, Avcon's working continually on 60% design review for us, and they should have that for our review in mid-June. Last month, we had our annual airport inspection, and there were some good things and some not so good things. There were some things that were addressed or brought to our attention that I think has been something that we've been kind of dealing with for probably 7 to 10 years, and it's runway 1836. It's our third runway. We have 2 other runways that are more of our primary runways, but our third runway is no longer being funded by the FDOT, no longer being funded by the FAA, and I think, Alan, you've been aware of this for a while. And what we've been trying to do is just kind of kick that can down the road as long as we could, and if there's anything we needed to do, we try to fix it in-house. But the FDOT kind of hammered me pretty good on our last inspection about the runway markings and some of the brush removal, and so we've done some preliminary cost analysis to figure out what would it take for us to take care of that in-house, and it's pretty substantial. So I'm going to be working with the FDOT and the FAA to see if there's any other way we can mitigate this to keep it open as long as we can. But at the end of the day, that third runway might have to go away, and so we're trying to do everything we can to keep it from doing that. But unfortunately, we're running out of funding. Yes.
I'm not quite right.
That's close
Runway
enough.
Talking about airport roads right over here, the FBO is down here.
Yeah.
And so this runway north-south is the one that the FAA has said that an airport of our size and the travel we have, they are not going to fund 3 runways. These runways are each a mile long, and this has been a debate we've had coming for a number of years. This is not a surprise to the airport committee or really to anybody
No.
with the airport. But this runway here is just, they fund these 2. When we have a mile-long runway, it costs a lot of money. I mean, just the remarking this thing is probably $50,000.
No, it was $173,000 just to remark it.
I mean, it's just beyond our ability. You don't generate that kind of revenue.
Yeah, it'd be hard to.
So, we'll try to keep it open as long as possible. This is one of the bases I bring down just
Sure.
to tie the piece together, that we weren't sure what was going to happen on this runway. So you may recall we had a proposal on an industrial park over here, but we moved that industrial park to over here because if this runway gets closed, then all of a sudden all the use over here changes dramatically. So it was a little premature for us to start designing an industrial park as if the runway was going to stay here, because if it disappeared, then you have a runway, an industrial park, way out of the way with this huge taxiway, this huge field sort of not functioning. So for the purposes that we have, the money we have, we moved the industrial park over here and the access roads. So we're working in this area over here. If this runway closes, there will be, and I'm not advocating it, but if FAA stops funding it and we can't maintain it with our resources, then we have no choice but to close it. Now, we're not going to necessarily dig it up, but
No.
it'll just be closed, and over time, the board and the airport committee will have to decide the future of that, because that's a lot of real estate sitting there that's clear. It's just a lot of land,
Right.
and other things can be done out there.
It's just one of the things I just want to bring it to our attention. I'm doing everything I can to keep it as open as long as we can without coming to you and asking for $250,000. I mean, it's just, we're trying to do everything we can in-house to keep the FAA and the FDOT happy with condition
Please
that.
don't come ask for that.
I won't. I'll put a big X on it before I do that. But I wanted to bring you up to speed on that. And lastly, there were some other areas at the airport. I mean, it's 1,100, 1,200 acres, something like that. And we try to maintain that as best as we can with the equipment that we have. There are some areas that we just can't get to. And I'm going to probably request maybe some official help from Public Works or somebody to help us go out there and mow some areas that we just don't have the equipment to get into, those ditches and areas that I think they might be better suited to do that for us. before we get inspected again, because when I'm getting inspected and they say, why isn't that done? And I say, I don't have the equipment, and then they go back and say, well, talk to the county. So I'm talking to the county. So I just might need some help with that in the future.
So the short answer, we passed the inspection.
We are past, but we have things we have to mitigate before July 31st. And so I'm on the horn right now, trying to get with the FAA, FDOT to see if I can restructure that runway as a VFR runway if I need to try to relieve some of that pressure. I doubt that's going to happen. We might be staring at the barrel of closing that thing here pretty soon, but I'm doing everything I can to keep it open.
Is there much expense in closing? You put out a notice to
No.
go to the airman, and you put a big white X on it, and that's it?
Yeah, basically, we'll paint a 10 by 10 X on it and do what's called a notice to airmen. And then those issues go away for FDOT's concern. We have some trees that's in the glide path ratio from that, and that's been there for 10 years. It's off airport property. And it puts us in a really weird situation trying to go to private owners and have them cut trees down on a runway that's really a third runway. So we're doing what we can, but it looks like we might have to close that thing down here pretty soon. Any questions for me?
Anybody have questions? All right, thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank y'all.
Miss Debbie Belton.
Good morning. There are two things I'd like to do this morning with you. One is to bring to you for your approval some policy revisions to the county's CDBG Housing Assistance Plan. Some of this we've discussed before, but some we have not. And if you have your policies in front of you, I did the strike and underline language so you could see what we're changing. On the first page, there's underlined language talking about what happens if a homeowner dies. And basically what I'm recommending, and this is pretty consistent with the language that is in the SHIP mortgage, that if there's a minor or a spouse living in the house at the time of the owner's death, that you can allow them to assume the loan. And you wouldn't need to do an income verification in order to do that. Just let it, allow it to happen. And you could do that without this policy change, but this just gives a little more comfort level to people who are applying and say, what happens if I die? What happens to my kids?
You need a motion?
And, well, but any questions on that?
Do you need a motion on that?
Well, there are a few changes, and so is the first one okay with you as far as you're concerned? Second page, I just clarified again at the top of the page that the limits on how much you can spend on a particular dwelling, you can vote to waive those. I mean, it's already alluded to elsewhere in this policy, but it just makes it clear that if you get a house that the cost is going to be above the limits you set, and I bring this to you and say, it's over the limit, do you want to approve that? Then you have the right to do that if you choose. Down at the bottom, though, the mobile home, manufactured home limit for anyone, I'm recommending that we raise that to $75,000. And the reason is because we're in Wind Zone 3, and also in order to get this funding, we had to promise that we'd do all this Energy Star stuff. So you put those two together, and the fact that some of the sites may need septic or well or things of that nature. So I recommend that we make that 75 the new maximum instead of 50,000.
All right, you want a motion on that separate from the first page? Or?
No, sir. I just want to go through the policy
Okay,
changes.
then make a whole motion?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. The third page,
Before you move on,
Question.
I was just talking to Alan. Are you aware of our exposure D requirement that we've been going through, which is in addition to Win 3?
I know 1,500 feet. Yeah, you've got another.
We used to think the shore was St. George Island, but it's now the Appalachian Bay.
Everywhere.
Okay.
Affects more.
And the 1,500 feet means you have to what does that mean in terms of
If
strength?
you're within 1,500 feet of the shore, you're in the exposure D, meaning the building has to be built to a higher standard.
Standard, so it's more than just a level 3.
Yeah.
So I just want to make sure that amount will cover.
Yeah, because, like, for example, we have one applicant right now that I believe is going to be within that, Francis Hunting, and we'll get to those in a minute.
I just want to make
Okay.
sure
Okay.
you're aware that 75
Okay. Yeah, and that's the kind of thing where what we can do is come to you and say, hey, this one is going to cost even more. So, I mean, if necessary, we'll do some competition, and you're not giving a blanket approval on any one mobile home. Now, we're just talking about limits.
I got a question.
Yes, sir.
But I want to go back to that 75.
Yes, sir.
That's on, that's if you have to replace a old trailer?
Yes, sir.
Okay, you haven't ran into none of that yet, have you?
I have talked with one reputable dealer about, what it would take to get this kind of standards in Franklin County. And he's saying, with the energy packages and things like that, we might be at, like around 65. So I just made it 75 for the fact of septic tank, well, any kind of clearing or anything like that might need to be done.
No, what I was asking was, you, on applicant, you haven't ran into any of that yet, right?
Oh, yes, sir, we will be. And in fact, I have some for you that
okay.
I'll be presenting. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Question,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Chairman. Septic tank and well, I thought this was supposed to be a pre-existing.
It is, but sometimes what is there is inadequate, like,
So we're doing the whole package then?
It could be. In other words, each house we would look at on a case-by-case basis, and depending on what they had, we would provide. For example, if their system is failing now, we don't want to leave a bad,
I thought it was for housing. I didn't know it was for septic tank, water well, whatever.
You'd have to get a CO, and that involves everything. And also, the state requires that when we do anything, we do it all.
Was that in the scope of work? I mean, was that within the scope when you applied for the grant for us, that they know that it's going to be used for septic tanks and wells and maybe hook up to sewer lines,
Yes.
water lines, or whatever?
Yes, ma'am. I mean, any kind of condition that is needed to be remedied for you to meet your local codes, and,
Okay.
yes, ma'am.
I don't have no problem with it, Debbie. I'm just asking the question because I mean, as we go in here, it's kind of like went into something else all of a sudden. So, the board at the time that we approved this said we wanted to serve as many people
Right.
as what we could, and to get them out of bad places and put them in good places.
And what happens is, we have these standards that we have to meet with the CDBG program. It's not like SHIP where you can say, well, I'm only going to do the roof. It doesn't work that way with CDBG.
So you had the leeway to be able to do the septic tank and all that?
Yes, ma'am.
New poles, new everything. Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Okay. And on page 3, currently, the county's policy is that you have to have homeowner insurance. Now, I think it's wise to always have homeowner insurance. However, with the income level that we're working with, most of them are not going to be able to afford insurance, and especially you combine it with Franklin County and mobile homes, and I think it's going to be very difficult to run this program with the requirement. Lori Schweitzer is not requiring homeowner insurance on the SHIP houses now. So I'm recommending that it be eliminated as a requirement. Not that we wouldn't recommend to people that, yes, you should have homeowner insurance.
They need
possibly.
homeowners, but they're not gonna be able to afford the homeowners, some of these little ladies, not
Right.
on their, monthly income.
Yes,
It's like, yeah.
Now, flood insurance, if they're in a 100-year floodplain, they have to have that. We have no wiggle room on that. That is a federal requirement, so we have
Flood
to.
insurance?
Yes, sir, if they're in a floodplain.
Okay.
And then on page 4, I did clarify on the second paragraph that we have a number of very low and low-income homeowners that we have to serve. I left percentage in there just in case next year, next time, who knows what the state will do. But right now, we have to hit a certain number. We have to have 2 very low and 3 low-income homeowners served for this grant. So I just added the word number on that. But the other change is down on the third paragraph where I added priority who live in mobile/manufactured homes, and that's something you'd wanted. We had discussed earlier. So I did that, and then I just moved down the other language.
Mr. Chairman, if I might.
Yes, sir.
On the first proposal on page 1, where it says that the board may allow a minor child under the age of 18 to assume the mortgage, I just want the board to be aware that that's probably going to require prior court approval. It can be done, but it's just not as simple as doing business with a minor child under the age of 18. If they're 18 and over and they're a child of the deceased, then they have full rights of contract. Minor children have limited rights of contract. Like I said, I think it can be done, but it will probably require prior court approval.
And that's why I use may, because this is something that you'd have to take up if it happened. You wouldn't necessarily want to automatically do it anyway, but just to make it clear that you may do this.
Mr. Chairman, I'm gonna make a motion, and I'm gonna put in with the lawyer. I want us to go by what the lawyer said, that we pass this, with the language put in what the lawyer said. Add it to it.
Add it to it.
On the minor.
Recommendation of the attorney.
Recommendation of attorneys.
Second.
Have a motion second on the floor. All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries.
Okay, all right, I'll get the exact language from Sure. And the second thing I wanted to do is to bring to you your 4 homeowner applicants that I'd like to recommend for approval in our first round of assistance. We have to do a minimum of 10 houses, and this is the first 4 I'm bringing to you. They're all mobile homes. I'm not bringing to you any houses at this time. These homeowners here, this will get us, where you see 30% of the median income, that is what DEO calls very low income, and we have to do 2. And so Ms. Beach and Ms. Polk would meet our requirements. We're done as far as numbers if we do these 2 houses. And then Pullofs and Hunting would be 2 of the 3 low incomes that we have to do. 50% is what they call low, 50% of the median income. These are, I will be doing like double checking on title, things like that, but we won't be going to bid until, everything is done. We have environmental clearance on each one from the state, which is something I have to do. I've already submitted Harriet Beach's, but the others I have not done yet. But I wanted your approval before I go any further on them. And these meet your priority criteria. They're all mobile homes. And they are in the income range that we need to hit. We can go higher, but we have a requirement to do 2 very low and 3 low. And so that helps us meet that. The column about received 5,000/5 and 10,000-10, the policy has, says we're going to give priority to people who have not received more than $5,000 in the past 5 years or $10,000 in the past 10 years in other programs like SHIP or weatherization, that kind of thing. So none of these have received that. 3 of the 4 are elderly, and every one has a disabled household member. And so there you see.